Welcome back after an epic panel discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you're ready for the next guest speaker. But before that, I just want to remind you guys of the code of conduct. Please remember that this space is a harassment-free one and that we want to enjoy ourselves, right? And bear in mind, we do swear a little. So if you just check out the other tracks as well as this one, you'll find that we've got an amazing speaker up and coming. His name is Sander, and he'll be talking about let's stop talking about Kubernetes. And I'm like, what the fuck are we going to talk about? But okay. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our next guest speaker, Sander.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, this is my cue.
Yes, this is your cue.
All right. And my screen is just shared, or you're going to share my screen later on?
Okay, well, it's going to be shared now.
All right. Well, I'll just start talking then. First, let me make my apologies, probably because of all the colors there. But I thought I'll cheer up the room a little bit because last week when we prepared the sessions, a couple of people complained about my boring background, so I changed it, and I even put on a yellow hoodie. So yeah, I changed my story a little bit because I was thinking about it yesterday evening and did some changes. So the topic was, what was it? About the next wave around Kubernetes. It's still in the talk, but I changed it a little bit to explain like my vision and hopefully start a discussion. So it's not going to be really technical. We are going to talk a little bit about Kubernetes still, but no, I'm going to do explain a little bit what I call like the first wave of Kubernetes, and we're still in the first wave, I think. And then a little bit about the pain of Kubernetes, and I think there's been a lot of talk about pains around Kubernetes. I'll point, or what is it, step on a few. And then I'm going to talk about what I call then the second wave. And now I know what the original topic was, why the second wave of Kubernetes is going to hit us even harder than the first wave. But I changed the story a little bit because, as I said, towards like my vision. And I'm going to be like comparing Kubernetes to Linux, because I don't know, but I read a lot about, and I think it was already said the first time like 5 years ago, that Kubernetes is going to be the Linux of the cloud. Oh, yeah, I've got a Mac mouse and it's really sensitive. So it already jumped to the next slide. So the first wave, and I think we're still in the first wave, because the first wave was all about the Kubernetes itself. So the Kubernetes infrastructure, from doing it yourself, like doing it the hard way, setting up everything yourself, to using like kubeadm or other tools, but really like focusing on the Kubernetes infrastructure. And then we moved towards managed Kubernetes services like AKS, EKS, GKE. I think there are a lot of what they call Kubernetes as a platform services, where they try to make it easier for you to spin up a Kubernetes cluster and also managing it. And we also saw Kubernetes management platforms that you can use to provision and manage other Kubernetes services, like Rancher, that you can use to spin up a lot of Kubernetes clusters, or Kubernetic, they'll do the same, to make it easier for you to get to use Kubernetes. But still, the end result is a Kubernetes API. So you need to know how to work with Kubernetes, and you need to understand the Kubernetes internals. And I think that's said a lot, but Kubernetes is not really developer friendly. Well, that's another discussion, but still, you need to learn, of course, how to work with Kubernetes and understand all of its objects. And I recently counted them, and I think it's up to 50. I don't know, probably even more nowadays. And to use and to initialize those objects, you need to write manifests. And of course, Kubernetes, as you all know probably, is quite difficult around role-based access control. I even heard somebody said, I can create a training on role-based access control that can take a whole week. So to get an impression on the complexity still of Kubernetes. And if we talk about developers, developers don't really care about Kubernetes because they build and create a piece of software and they just want to run it. So they don't care about all the internals. They just want to have like a URL where they can access their applications, or some kind of log dashboard where they can see all the logs of their applications to do some bug fixes. And that's it. They don't want to know everything about the Kubernetes internals. And Kubernetes is still one part of a very complicated puzzle, because Kubernetes alone is, yeah, of course, you can do, you can get logs from Kubernetes and you can get some metrics from Kubernetes, but it doesn't provide you with like a log aggregation or metric dashboards. Those need to be added to Kubernetes to get the real potential. And I try to give an impression of all kinds of topics that you, and it all depends, of course, on your organization and your use case, because I think I put in like a multi-tenancy or self-service for developers. Yeah, if you're an organization of like 10 people, you don't really care. Yeah, but there are a lot of topics that you need to touch, mainly also around security, because Kubernetes policies or security policies are deprecated. So you need to come up with something else to do security on Kubernetes. You'll probably want to do something with a MTLS on a networking level using a service mesh, and it goes on and on and on. And before you know it, and now my story is, let me change, go back a little bit. Do I know how to go back? No. Sorry, this was what I was afraid of. Because when I'm in full mode, I really struggle with moving to my slides. Okay, let's start again. Yeah, so all of these topics you need to address at a certain point, or some you won't, or some you need. And then you start looking what kind of solutions can I use for, like, for instance, ingress control. And then you start looking at all of the projects that are available. And I didn't count them really myself, but I think there are over already 1,200 projects. So that means that if you're in like the day zero, where you start designing and making choices, that can take a lot of time, because what are you going to do if there are like 10 different projects for the same goal? Are you going to test and try them out all one by one? Then you're probably working on just a couple of aspects for a really long time. So there are so many choices that you need to make, and different solutions that you can use. And in the end, and now we're coming more towards like my vision, is that what we're doing now is that we're all trying to create, build, and also maintain then a kind of operating system around Kubernetes. Because if you compare Kubernetes with Linux, you could say that Kubernetes is only the kernel. And then you need to add more functionality to it to create your own like operating system. I call it an operating system. Other people would call it a platform. You probably heard people say, yeah, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. It's, I think, a little bit the same. You're using or starting out with like a vanilla Kubernetes, and you start adding different components and projects to it, and also try to integrate them and automate them. And that is a very difficult process. And in the end, what you're building also needs to be maintained in the end. And because of the, everything is going really fast in this space, so you probably also need to change stuff. And then when you did some integrations, you'll end up with what we call technical debt, because then you need to go back and say, oh, but then we integrated this, those projects in this way, and now we need to change them. How do we then need to go forward? So that is what I call like the second wave. And I think a lot of people are still not aware of the difficulties that come with Kubernetes. It is not that you need to master Kubernetes itself. No, you need to master a lot of other topics around networking, security, storage, monitoring. So it's way more than Kubernetes itself. And what I call the second wave is that we start realizing that to get the most out of Kubernetes, we need to do a huge investment, not only in time, but also in money, to build something on top of Kubernetes to get the most out of it. And then, of course, if you go back to like the managed services, and I usually take like AKS as an example in Azure, they started out with AKS, like a vanilla Kubernetes service, and they manage the control plane, but the result is still like a vanilla Kubernetes. And now they start adding a lot of additional services that I think also touch a lot of the aspects that I showed in the previous slide, where you can use all of those additional services, but then you're completely locked in. Because if you start using, like on AKS, the policy solution for AKS in Azure, it's based on Gatekeeper. But if you're moving towards like AWS, you cannot use that same service. So you need to come up with something different. You need to build something yourself, or use probably a service in AWS if that is available. So you cannot move from one to the other without consequences. And of course, I already touched on it, the technical debt. But I think also more important that all of those additional projects and services that you're using also need to be maintained also from a lifecycle management perspective. And of course, if you remember the previous slide with the 1,200 projects, there are a lot of startups and companies behind it. And their investors, of course, in the end, all want to have some kind of monetization. So in the end, you will need to pay for services. And I see that a lot of them are moving towards like a SaaS model. But who wants to have like a SaaS solution for only one problem where the vendor needs to have access to your own environment? Nobody wants to give away the keys. And if you need like 10 vendors for all of those aspects that you need to touch, for all the challenges you need to solve, then you need to manage a lot of vendors. So that's going to be really complicated. And of course, as I already said, there's so much add-ons and apps to choose from. So this is like the second wave, and that's going to be, I think, in the end, the point where we say, well, this is enough is enough. Yeah, so this is too expensive, too complicated. Let's choose something else, and probably be the end of Kubernetes. I don't know. So does this sound familiar? Does it sound, so what I'm showing here, what are we talking about here? Is this Kubernetes or is this Linux? I think there are already like a lot of what's the English word? Comparison, yeah, between Kubernetes and Linux. There's a whole community around the Kubernetes kernel. No, it's not the kernel. Kubernetes core development, and already like thousands of other supporting technologies and projects. So it's looking really the same. But there's a big difference, because what I try to explain, that everybody's trying to build their own like operating system, or call it like a distribution, a combination of a Kubernetes version or as a kernel, and then with all the other solutions around it. But if you go and look at the Linux analogy, then Linux has like hundreds of different distributions for all kinds of use cases and different audiences. And a Linux distribution, if you take that into mind, is free and open source. When we all had a CD-ROM in our laptop, you could just download it, burn it, put it in, and run and install it. And installing it was pretty easy. It's just almost next finish, and then you could work on your machine. So it was easy to install, and a Linux distribution comes with like a desktop-like environment, yeah, with a Windows system, with built-in applications like a notepad, or that's probably very easy, yeah, but built-in applications that you can just, after installing it, click on it and use them. Yeah, you don't need to like install them, configure them, integrate them with all kinds of other stuff. No, it offers like an out-of-the-box experience. So this is a little bit my vision. Why don't we create these kinds of distributions where you could just take like any managed Kubernetes service, install your distribution on top of it, and then probably with a single command, and then log in and start doing your thing. Yeah, so start using all of the applications that are integrated into that distribution, like for instance on user management or security, using serverless features, observability, all integrated into a single package, so you don't need to build some kind of layer on top of Kubernetes to help you with all of those challenges. And of course, we can go further to provide like a new user experience with that distribution, with it like a desktop-like experience, to abstract the whole Kubernetes technology by providing just a simple user interface where you can just say, click, click, and deploy your application. And just like I read somewhere, Linus Torvalds' new mission is that I want to make it Linux, I want to make it boring. So why can we not also make Kubernetes boring by providing like a new abstraction layer on top of it, making it very easy for developers to use without having to know all the internals. And that is also the vision behind the reason why we started out with our company and our open source project. And this week, and that's why I'm a little tired, we completed the last step where we can now offer with a single install a complete platform experience, you may call it, or like a desktop experience on top of Kubernetes that you can just install with 4 values. There are no dependencies. You can log in and use all the integrated applications with a high level of security in multiple modes, just like SA Linux. As you can turn off policies, you can turn on policies, you can turn it into like a monitoring mode where you can see all your where you're not complying to policies in your logs. And it's just ready, out of the box experience. And hopefully there will be more, because there are like 200 Linux distributions. So why aren't there like 200 Kubernetes distributions? Yeah. And not what people now call a distribution like an OpenShift, but it's not like the Kubernetes distribution. No, it's like the whole experience around it. So if you want to talk about what I talked about, or like to start a discussion, then please contact me, or take a look at our open source projects. There are like 8 projects all combined, but eventually it's the most important project is the Automy Core project, where it all comes together.
All right.
I didn't look at the time.
Thank you, Sander. You're very well on time. Don't worry. I really like your presentation. I think I need to. I don't see shit with this. I think I already mentioned it. And
you put
now
I
used to feel ridiculous with these glasses, and now the contrast between the two of us is like, yeah, I need to just take it off and probably sing some Mana Mana or something.
I thought you put it on because of all the shiny colors.
The shiny colors, yes, that's right. I really enjoy your talk. I think that you had a very good point in this abstraction layer you're proposing on top of Kubernetes and the different distributors. I felt like a chill in my back when you said, "Is this the end of Kubernetes, or it might be the end of Kubernetes?" But you're actually you're naming differently, right? So you are calling something that what we know today as Kubernetes would run on like in the core, and on top of that, those different distributions that you are referring. It seems yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, and those distributions can be like a little bit opinionated. Eh? So if you take a look at the 1,200 projects, you could come up with multiple distributions, all specific combinations of multiple projects, but already completely pre-configured and integrated. So you don't need to install them. You don't need to do the life cycle management on all the integrated applications. It's all combined into the distribution. And the only thing you need to do is watch for a new version of the distribution and do an update.
Okay, and so these distributions, like you said, the CNCF catalog is huge. And if I want to try out, if I want to have a service mesh in my project, or let's say I don't know what a service mesh is, I need that functionality. Like you said, I can't try them all. I can't go one by one and pick the best. So it would be really nice to have some layer of abstraction there and declare somehow my rules, what I want, and then have the abstraction layer to take care of, yeah, whatever it was, Istio or whatever.
That's a good example, because we chose Istio as it's part of the core as the service mesh, but it is abstracted away. So with the user interface, you can create services, and it will automatically configure the Istio gateway. It will create the Istio virtual services. You don't even see that you're using Istio.
That's great.
But of course, if you want to, just like Linux, you can open a command line and use kubectl and use all the features of Istio because it's there. Yeah? But by default, you don't see it. And a lot of use cases, you won't need to see it because it is already like completely automated.
Okay, I see. That's great. So if I still need it, I can write my old YAML the old way, the actual way, and apply that to that new distro that I'm using.
Yeah, so in our case, you can use the user interface to create services and also deploy images, but you can still also create Kubernetes services or write your own manifest or set up your own pipelines. It is, of course, that's the whole thing. It's completely open.
Yeah.
So it's not a lock-in. Yeah, you cannot, in our case. So we have like a core of a specific set of projects that we're using, like Istio and Prometheus and Knative. But we also have a lot of optional applications that you can just turn on or off. So like Harbor, for instance, it's also completely integrated, but you can say, I don't need Harbor, then just turn it off and it's gone. But if you would like to have it, you just say, okay, turn it on. And then you can immediately use it, and it's completely integrated. So it's user aware, it is team aware, it is also automated. And so when you create a user, that user will automatically have access to the project in Harbor.
That's great. Yeah. I'm doing a shameless plug here, but at CS, we have an open source project called the External Secret. It used to be our project, now it's actually open for the community, and there's a different organization, but we're contributing to it, External Secret Operator. So that's something that could be on and off in one, or on off in one of the distributions. So I assume we could have a distribution with this way of handling secrets in Kubernetes, and that is something that you can turn on and off in any particular distribution. I'm just thinking, planning ahead. That's great. So thank you a lot, Sander. I don't know if you have any closing remarks or anything. I really enjoy your talk and got me thinking of how to plan ahead, actually.
Yeah, it's more to start a discussion, to see if we can move this forward, because it's now it looks like everybody is on his own, working on its own projects. And of course, we have the big vendors that come up with what they call a complete enterprise platform, but it's not like working out of the box. They offer just sometimes a nice interface, but in the back, the thing it does is deploy a chart. So you're configuring a chart, and if that chart needs to be updated, then you're on your own.
Yeah, you're right. Cool. Well, thanks a lot. I think I have to say goodbye with a song. We need to sing Mana Mana or something because Wuyo is waiting for this. She's all excited. So you'll do the Mana and I'll do the things. I don't know what those are.
You don't know?
Take it away.
Okay. Mana Mana. Mana Mana. Mana Mana.
That was great, man. Thanks a lot, son. Thank you, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.